Hi there, GMC owners. Today in your 2019 GMC Sierra 1500, we're going to be taking a look and showing you how to install B&W's fifth wheel base rail kit. And this is what our fifth wheel rail kit looks like when it's installed. It is designed to work with pretty much all of B&W's fifth wheels, and it'll also work with a lot of the competitors. The ones we have here from Reese should work just fine, as well as Demco. It is a custom fit rail kit that's designed to work with your GMC Sierra. And it comes with all the necessary hardware that we need to get it installed. This rail kit will allow us to simply just drop our fifth wheel in here so we can drop it in or remove it as we need to. Our customer's using a B&W Patriot with his setup here. You can get a lot of different fifth wheels available here at eTrailer, so you might want to choose the best one for you. One of the things that I do recommend is just verifying how your trailer and your truck are going to mesh together. This customer here does have a short bed truck, and in most cases I would recommend something that has like a sliding mechanism to help move it away from the cab so we don't have any accidental collision with the cab and our fifth wheel trailer. Now our customer may have a like a sidewinder type component on his trailer, so it may pivot on the trailer side, giving him that extra distance he needs. Just keep that in mind when you're picking the correct fifth wheel for your truck and trailer combination. If you want to follow along with us, we'll show you how to get these rails installed. They are going to have to do some drilling into the bed. And I'm not going to lie, this fifth wheel kit is one of the more difficult B&W kits that I've installed. I do love B&W as far as their kits. They just seem to work a whole lot better than any of the other manufacturers that I've installed. Their machining just seems to be quite a bit higher. Things line up a whole lot better. Just so happens on this particular truck where our components seem to line up, it's very difficult places to access. So you might get a little bit frustrated, but just take your time with us on this one and you can definitely get through this at home. We're now in the bed of our truck and we'll need to make our measurements depending on the length of the bed of our truck. It does vary depending if you have a short or a long bed, so you want to refer to your instructions to make sure you're making the appropriate marks. We're marking from the edge of the bed here and measuring towards the front. Now that we've got our marks made, we're just going to get our rail here set up on it, and we also need to center it as well. There we go. We've got it right up on our marks where we need it to be. And then when centering it here, we'll just double check our measurements side to side to make sure that it's going to be equal. We'll just measure it from there. See what we get. We'll check on this side, make sure that they're equal. That looks good. Everything is nice and equal there. So our rail's where we need it to be at the appropriate distance from the back and also centered side to side. The next thing we're going to want to do is we need to mark each one of these. We're going to move in one set of holes. So we're going to use this set here on each side. We're going to mark that down in the center. And I'm going to use both my paint stick here and I'm also going to use a punch to punch it. The paint stick just makes it pop a little bit easier to see. And the center punch is going to be used to help us align our drill bit in the appropriate spot. Straight down in the center of the square. Put your punch in and make your mark. Now that we've got each of those marks made, we can get our rail out of the way. And we're going to grab our drill bit and drill our holes. We are eventually going to be going to a 9/16 size, but we're going to start with like an 1/8 inch drill bit just so we can verify that we've got our holes lined up properly before we drill a big old hole in the bed. So each of these marks we made, take that small drill bit and drill each one of those out. All right, now that we've got those drilled out, we're going to grab our side plates. We're going to get those into position, and then we're going to verify that the holes for our hardware that our hardware is going to slide through on our side plates match up with these holes, because if they don't match up, then we're going to need to reposition to make sure everything lines up. Everything should line up, but we definitely want to check before we drill these larger. We're now underneath the vehicle, and before we put our side plate on, we got to feed some hardware into place. So here's our axle here. You can see the jounce bumper. If we go straight up from the jounce bumper, you're going to have a hole an oval shaped hole in the frame. You're gonna have one just like that on the opposite side. This hole that's here on the inside of the frame is also present on the other side of the frame, just on the outside. It's in the exact same location. You're gonna take the fish wire that comes in your kit, and it looks like they did a number on this one. Got crushed a little bit. We should still be able to make it work. We're gonna push it through that outside hole until we come out through the inside here. After we come through the inside, we're gonna take the long spacer plate that comes in your kit. It's got a square hole in the middle. That is gonna slide over that threaded end, and then we can actually push this into the frame. Next, you're gonna thread one of the carriage bolts that comes in your kit, and this is the shorter of the carriage bolts. You're gonna receive some 2-inch ones and some 1.5-inch ones. We want the 1.5-inch ones. And we're gonna try and get this threaded on here. It kind of came mangled. It must have got crushed in shipping a little bit. It's okay. It looks like it's still gonna work for us. It just has to grab the bolt, so it's nothing super, you're not gonna use this to actually hold anything in here. It's just a temporary component to help us get this fed into place. We can then push our carriage bolt in through the hole. And then pull it until it comes out the other side of the frame here. Once we've got it on the other side of the frame, we're gonna remove our fish wire. We're gonna then place on this spacer here, and then also this nut plate. This is just gonna, it's like a retainer for our bolt, so our bolt can't fall back inside the frame. So I'm gonna put my finger through this hole, because you should be able to feel it. The frame's not very thick. And I'm just pushing the carriage bolt through the hole. We can then take our coiled wire off here. Take our spacer, slide that on, and then put the retainer on as well. And the retainer is just going to thread on there. You can push it on, but I recommend threading it because it's going to be really hard to push it. There we go. We've got our bolt sticking out where we need it. We're going to do the same thing on the other side to get the bolt prepared over there. For our fender liners, we're going to have 3 Torx screws. You'll have one here, one kind of here in the center, just like about right at the top of the tire, and then one here at the back. We're going to use a T15 Torx to remove these. For our front and our back one, we can get our gun in there. For the middle one, you might have to switch to a small ratchet. And a small ratcheting tool for your bit here works really well for these tighter areas to get in here to get this last one. Removing these 3 will let us peel this liner back. We're not going to remove the entire thing. We're just going to be peeling it out of the way to get our side rails installed. So with that last one there, you can see now that this liner, we can just kind of grab it and just peel it out like this. There we go. And we'll do the same thing on the other side to get that out of the way. We're now underneath the vehicle on the passenger side. You can see this wire where it runs along the inside of the frame here. Here's our jounce bumper. Right when we get in front of the axle here, it goes on top of the frame. We need to get it off the top of the frame there. So we're just gonna get in here with our trim panel tool and then just pop this up. Once you get it popped out of the frame, we're simply then just going to pull it down here, kind of on the side. We're just trying to get this out of the way so when we drill through here, we know we're not going to drill into it. And it might actually be even easier if we go up forward a little bit more, and we can pop it out up here too, and that'll give us a little bit more kind of leeway to maneuver this around some. I'm also going to pop one off right on the back right here. There we go. And with the 3 of those out of the way, we get a little bit more movement out of it. Trying to get this thing, just making sure we can pull it back. That's the main thing, is we're just trying to pull it back out of the way. And this will work pretty well too. We can just go right on top of our shock mount, and that'll keep it away from the top of the frame. Because our hardware that's going to pass down through the frame, through the bed, is going to sit pretty much right on top of the frame. So that's why we're trying to get it out of the way of that. Now we can get our side plates installed. In order to get these installed, I did have to put a pole jack underneath the hitch here at the back to lift up on the vehicle some. That gave us more distance between the axle and the frame to get it in place. If you're doing this at home on the ground, you can use a floor jack in the same location to lift it up. We can then slide our plates into position, and we actually are sliding this in on the passenger side. We're going to slide it starting at the front of the truck. We're going just like this around the shock, and then we can tip it up over the frame. And we are going to have to pull out on this. It might be easier in most cases to maybe head out to the other side to flip it up over. So now we're on the outside, and in order to peel this fender liner back further, we're going to take these 2 nuts off. So we're just using a 10mm socket to remove these nuts. Now, the other thing you could do is you could just remove your rear tire, which I would recommend. It's a lot easier to install these side plates with the rear tire off. Our customer's got a wheel lock though and didn't provide the key, so we're going to be doing this all with the wheel on. So you can follow us if you don't want to remove the wheel. But if you take the wheel off, you can pretty much just set this thing right in here. You won't have to do all this extra fishing in the way we're having to guide it into the side. And that'll let us peel this back just a little bit further. Because we're going to really need to peel this out in order to get this up on top of the frame. Same on this side. So you can see if you have the wheel off, it's significantly easier to do. Because working around the wheel here is really difficult. And then we just need to keep pushing this side plate up until it's up against the frame here, where we can get our bolt through it, just like that. This is the bolt that we had fed in earlier. Slide on a flat washer and a lock washer, and then you can thread on your nut to hold it in place. And we can go ahead and put our U-bolts in place as well while we're down here. So we'll go ahead and pop this wiring off on the side here. Just use your trim panel tool. You don't have to pop it off, but it's a lot easier to get your U-bolt in place because it has to go between the wiring and our frame there. We don't want to pinch the wiring. And then the U-bolt will line up with the holes in your side plate here. There we go. Get it to pass through both of the holes on the other side. And then we can take a block washer and a nut, and we're going to thread that onto each end of our U-bolt here. And then we'll put our front one in. It's basically the same. Just make sure you get it. It has to go between the wiring and your components there. It can be a little tricky to find the sweet spot here where this is going to fit. And our other U-bolt here on the front is going to be the exact same way. Just goes around the frame. Make sure you don't pinch it between the wiring. And then put a lock washer and nut on the other side to hold it in place. With this one U-bolt here, it does need to have the U-bolt portion here to be just right in front of the exhaust hanger. If you have it right behind, it'll bolt down at an angle and it's not going to clamp properly. So now we've got our side plates on. We looked right up through the holes. We could see that they lined up. So now we're going to grab our 9/16 drill bit and enlarge each of our holes. Once we've got them all drilled out, we'll clean up this mess and then use a little bit of clear coat to seal up our holes. And those will just help to protect against rust and corrosion. We can now put our rail into position. Just line up the rail with the holes we drilled out. We can then take the longer carriage bolts that come in our kit, and they're going to drop down through the holes that we had drilled.
you'll have these kind of half little U or C-shaped spacers. These are going to slide underneath on these side bolts here, because you got a gap between the corrugation here and our plate that's going to take up that gap, and then your bolt's going to drop down through the middle of that. Looks like we got quite a bit of powder coating on our rail too, so you might need a hammer to knock the bolt down into here, because it's nothing below stopping this bolt from going in. It's actually the powder coating on the rail. It's just so thick the bolt won't fit. So you can just tap that in with a hammer. Same thing on the other side. And then we can head down below and put our hardware on down there to secure it. We're now underneath the vehicle. We can put our hardware on down here. For our center bolt, we're going to need 2 spacers. You're going to use the U-shaped one to go on here, and then you'll also place one of these square ones that comes in your kit, kind of rectangle square ones, and then we'll follow that up with a lock washer and a nut. For our side plates, those are just going to get the spacer, a lock washer, and then a nut. But what we're going to do on these is we're going to put the nuts on there first, and then use that to draw the bolt down before we put the lock washer on it, because of all that thick powder coating. It's just not going to stick through far enough for us to be able to get all the pieces on there. So if you tighten it down and then loosen it back up, it'll pull that bolt down and give you enough room to be able to put that lock washer on there. So we're going to get all these started, run them all down, and then we'll put those washers on afterwards. You can just use the nut as well, but I would recommend the plate because it's kind of it's a slotted hole. And if you can fit the lock washer on there, by all means, put the lock washer on there. It's just that some of these, due to that powder coating, it's just not going to happen. And yeah, pretty much all of these are going to be like that because the powder coating is just so thick on this. And then we can go back and tighten them down. I already snugged it up and put that washer in there. For this one here above the shock, you're only going to be able to get to that with a wrench. It's just not even possible to get any kind of socket on it because of the stuff right below it. So we're tightening these down with a 19 millimeter socket, or for this one particular bolt, we're going to be using a wrench. We're now going to put our 5th wheel into position. Lining it up with your rail. There we go. Once you get it to drop into that rail, we'll lift up on the back and set it into our other rail. And this is how we're going to know the position where to drill for this rail. This way we know it's going to fit with our 5th wheel properly. And it also makes it a lot easier for us to determine where to put our components, since we can just kind of use this as like a template. And now we're just going to rinse and repeat, doing the exact same thing with this rail as we did with the other one. We're going to mark our holes in the center. And for this front rail here, for our other rail, the only difference in the holes is going to be the center one. We had to use the rear hole in the rear rail. We're going to use the front hole here on the front rail. So now we can just lift this up. Set that to the side, and then drill them out with the same sizes that we had used before. And we want to be careful when drilling through these. We don't want to go too far. Our fuel tank's down there, and it could be possible to hit it, so. All right, now that we've got that back in, we'll just take our carriage bolts and drop them down, and then we're going to head below to secure them. Any place that has the corrugation like this is going to get those spacers to make sure it takes up any gaps. Now we're going to drop our carriage bolts down through. Now you do also get in your kit, you'll get a couple of hex head bolts, and those are optional. You don't have to use those. We are going to use one though, just to make our lives easier here. Our fuel tank back here makes it really hard to get to this bolt to torque it down. So we're going to drop our carriage bolt down through there and use that instead. We're going to drop our hex head bolt down and use that instead of our carriage bolt in this location. Okay, I guess we're not going like that. Okay, and I always like to slide my pins in before we go to tighten down our hardware. That'll just ensure that our fifth wheel is going to be lined up properly, so we know that when we tighten everything down, we're going to be able to pull these pins in and out and get our fifth wheel in and out of here, and it's not going to keep it in like a bind. And now we're going to put our hardware on. This is going to be the exact same hardware as your other rail, and it's going to be exactly the same as far as which pieces go in which locations. We can then go back and torque our hardware to the specifications outlined in our instructions. After you've got all your hardware torqued down, you can just reinstall any fender liners and the brake line bracket bolts that you'd removed, and that'll complete your installation
of B&W's base rail kit on our 2019 GMC Sierra 1500.